The streets of Whitechapel, London in the late 1800s were no strangers to crime. Poverty, desperation, and darkness filled the alleyways, but in 1888 a new level of horror emerged. It was in these fog-covered streets that a shadowy figure, known only as Jack the Ripper, would terrorize the city. His reign of terror lasted for only a few months, but the fear he instilled would leave a permanent scar. Jack the Ripper didn't just kill, he butchered. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished, leaving behind a mystery that endures to this day. This is the story of Jack Ripper, the faceless monster who remains one of the history's most notorious and elusive killers. In 1888, London was the heart of the British Empire, a city of grandeur and industrial progress, but not far from the wealth and splendor lay Whitechapel, a district that was drowning in poverty. Here the streets were narrow, dirty, and teeming with destitute. Crime rate was high and life was harsh, especially for women who often turned to prostitution just to survive. It was in these grim surroundings that Jack the Ripper would strike. His victims were women, vulnerable, often outcasts, trying to scrape by in an unforgiving world. The first sign of his terror would begin with the discovery of a woman's lifeless body, mutilated in ways that shocked even the most hardened police officers. On the morning of August 31st, 1888, the body of Marianne Nichols was found in Box Row. Her throat had been slashed and her body mutilated. At first, the police thought it was just another murder in a dangerous part of town, but soon they would realize this was something far more sinister. Barely a week after Marianne Nichols' murder, another body was discovered. This time, it was Annie Chapman. Found on September 8th, she had been killed in a similarly brutal fashion. Her body was slashed and mutilated, and parts of her internal organs were missing. This was no ordinary killing. The persecution of mutilation suggested the killer had anatomical knowledge, perhaps even a background in surgery. Panic began to spread through Whitechapel, as whispers of a monster lurking in the shadows grew louder. By now, the press had caught wind of the story. Sensational headlines filled the newspapers, dubbing the killer Jack the Ripper. The public was gripped by fear, and the police were under immense pressure to catch the murderer. But Jack the Ripper was always one step ahead. The autumn of 1888 would come to be known as the Autumn of Terror. Jack the Ripper's killing spree continued, with Elizabeth Street and Catherine Edwins found dead on the same night, September 30th. Elizabeth Street was discovered in Dutfield's yard, her throat slit, but with no further mutilation. It is believed that the Ripper was interrupted before he could complete his gruesome work. Just hours later, the body of Catherine Edwins was found in Little Square. Her body had been savagely mutilated, with her face slashed and organs removed. It was clear Jack the Ripper was escalating. As fear gripped London, the police scrambled for answers. The streets of Whitechapel were patrolled by officers day and night, but it seemed impossible to catch the killer. Hundreds of suspects were questioned, false leads pursued, but Jack the Ripper remained a ghost. Letters claiming to be from Rippers flooded the newspapers and police, taunting authorities. One of the most famous letters, signed "From Hell," was accompanied by a piece of a human kidney said to have belonged to one of the victims. Jack the Ripper's final known victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found on November 9, 1888. Her murder was by far the most horrific. Inside a small, dilapidated room in Miller's Court, her body was discovered by her landlord. What he saw was beyond anything Whitechapel had witnessed. Kelly's body had been utterly destroyed, her face unrecognizable, her organs strewn across the room. The level of savagery was unimaginable, even from someone as brutal as Jack the Ripper. And then, after the murder of Mary Jane Kelly, the killings stopped. Jack the Ripper vanished into the fog of history as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind 5 confirmed victims, though some believe the true number could be higher. Despite the exhaustive efforts of the police, the Ripper was never caught, and his identity remains one of the greatest mysteries in criminal history. Over the decades, countless theories have emerged about Jack the Ripper's identity. Was he a doctor or a butcher? Did he die after the final murder, or did he simply move on to another part of the world? Dozens of names have been suggested, some plausible, others wild speculations. But despite modern technology, forensic advancements, and endless research, Jack the Ripper remains a shadowy figure, shrouded in mystery. The fear that Jack the Ripper instilled in people of Whitechapel was not just about killings, it was about the unknown. Who was this man who seemed to strike without warning, vanished without a trace, and leave no clues behind? The lack of resources was only heightened the legend of Jack the Ripper, transforming him from a real-life killer into a symbol of terror itself. Jack the Ripper's story endures not just because of the horrific nature of his crimes, but because of the mystery that still surrounds him. He is a reminder of how even the most populated and policed areas, darkness can strike, and a killer can blend into the crowd unnoticed. The streets of Whitechapel, once haunted by the Ripper's shadow, now stand as a place of morbid fascination for those who seek to unravel his identity. But perhaps the truth will never be known. Jack the Ripper's identity remains buried in history, and his legend continues to cast a dark cloud over London. The streets may have changed, but the mystery of the Ripper lingers, a chilling reminder of the faceless terror that once prowled the alleys of Whitechapel, leaving fear and horror in his wake.